Hey guys, how's it going? Jay Sensational here. Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be covering the patch that we've been kind of waiting for, the patch where we've had the Seraphine Vayne kind of meta sitting around. And it's having been a slower period, so very excited to get back into it, especially because this is the patch where a lot of people are coming back for Worlds. So this is the patch that the Worlds qualifiers we played on. So very excited to see the changes. Just a quick note, I forgot about daylight savings time, so this patch actually came out an hour ago. So I just kind of like was a doofus. And now we're an hour late. So haha. But better late than never. Here's a quick graphic. Not gonna really cover this because it's gonna be in the changes, but let's just jump into it. So amongst the things that they're buffing, Varus is getting buffed to 7+ allies. There are a lot of like just sort of like very slight buffs across the board, like Varus, Vayne, Gwen, Jax, I believe are just very tiny buffs. I'm very surprised that Varus was in need of a buff. I think that he was actually a pretty decent card, especially because like cards like Momentous Choice are a double buff. There's the Lunari Cultist that gives you 2 gems. Like Varus wasn't really in need of this, but if they're strengthening Varus, cool. Jinx. Jinx is probably the card that I was probably the most excited one for. Just because, well, I actually kind of like Jinx. And Jinx now creates a super mega death rocket on her level up, which is really key. Especially in more aggressive decks that, getting that extra 4 damage or just having like an immediate payoff of leveling Jinx, and not to mention if Jinx sticks around for the board. The Jinx struggle to be competitive. Turns out emptying your hand was a hefty price to pay. So giving it as a little bit of compensation, especially if it doesn't stick, right? Because like you level Jinx, your opponent kills the Jinx, well, you're kind of out of luck. So pretty cool buff overall. I thought that they would like help increase their survivability instead, because I definitely think that was definitely the weaker part of Jinx. But at least having some compensation here seems pretty good actually. Jax, 15 to 12. Again, like I don't know if Jax really needed this kind of buff, but I do agree where I think Jax was very heavily propped up by Vayne. And so given the potential nerfs to Vayne, I would assume that things like Jax and Varus, obviously to a much lower extent. I don't know if anyone's playing Varus Vayne really, but Jax I think definitely might need it. We'll see what depending on like what the Varus changes are. So for Gwen, this is kind of like the niche case we were talking about, where leveled Gwen snips her minimum of 2 damage, so that her skill no longer fizzles completely. And if you like Quicksand Gwen and she has 0 attack, she doesn't deal 0 damage. So there is a, well, I assume this might still fizzle. It's unclear. It might just be that, oh, even when she is stunned. Okay, so even when she is stunned, even if she is like, yeah, I'll have to test this out. It might be like only when she's stunned. If you just recall it, it might fizzle. It's not super clear, but it is a very slight buff here as well. Seraphine though, oh my god. Oh my god, now that's a nerf. From 6 to 9 spells. That's crazy. That's beyond crazy. I have to play 9 new spells? How big of a nerf is this? I'm gonna refresh really quickly to see if the images pop up. I'm not sure if they will. Oh, there you go. But 6 to 9. 9 spells. Oh my god. Do you just play Karma at that point? In like the Ionia versions, you might just play Karma. It's unclear. 9 is like what? Maybe like an entire turn or 2. That's very heavy. I obviously like the payoff for a card like this is insane. Karma levels insane. But not only, I think what's important to recognize about a nerf like this is not only does it take longer for Seraphine to actually level up herself, her payoff is also reduced because now there's 3 extra spells that don't get doubled anymore, right? Hypothetically, you could build your deck in a way such that you're generating like 1 mana spells or like whatever kind of spells, and or like, you know, you're generating like 5 cost spells, you play those spells, whatnot. And those don't get doubled anyways, but those also just slow down how quickly you level your Seraphine, right? So not only is this slowing down your Seraphine level up, but the less time it gets slowed down by, it means the payoff of leveled Seraphine is a lot less. This is sort of a double whammy in a sense. And that does really, really affect a card like this, especially because Fan Club Present now is a 5 cost as well. I think overall her design's like okay-ish. But I think at 5 mana, it's definitely going to be a huge, huge deal. Because now also just your turn 4 is going to be very lackluster as well. So I think this is a very appropriate change. This is super heavy. Definitely a lot more surprised by this. I think this was a lot more expected. But this is quite insanely crazy. Tumble from 3 to 4. And oh, okay. So yeah, so they're changing Tumble from 3 to 4, which I think is completely valid given the fact that Tumble is just super crazy. I still think Vayne is just insane still, even though Tumble costs 4 mana. Because some decks just don't need you to play Tumble every turn, right? There's maybe like 1 or 2 decks out there that will play Tumble when you generate, right? But if you play for like 3 mana, 2 mana, that's completely fine. And I don't foresee this change really being all that impactful. I think they saw like a Vayne Rumble pop off in like the first week of it, and then maybe they're like, oh, this might be problematic. Obviously, this change affects specifically that deck the most, but decks like, you know, my Yasuo like Vayne deck, you know, just throwing that out there, it doesn't really care about this change very much. And when they buff Vayne, yeah, they just keep it 0. I mean, this is not a buff. This is not. Yes, it's a buff, but like, I wouldn't like. I don't know. I think they they could have used this wording at the very beginning, just as like a hedge if they needed to change the cost of Tumble. But anyways, like this is what the card was supposed to do in the past, and you know, 3 versus 4 is, you know, quite irrelevant. But even then, like if you level up Vayne, which a lot of decks can do, then Tumble isn't really affected by this change, right? So I really feel like Vayne got like a very tiny tap on the wrist, whereas like Seraphine just got like absolutely gutted. So interesting choice. But I think at least for me, when it comes to changes like these, I'm definitely a little bit happy about the direction, because like a card like Vayne enables a lot more champions outside of herself, whereas, you know, a lot of champion like Seraphine enables a lot of decks around herself. So I think you can get definitely a lot more. I think you get a lot more variety out of a card like Vayne, and you get a lot more homogeny out of a card like Seraphine. So overall, like if I had to choose which one I want to nerf more, then my instinct would be to nerf Seraphine more, because a lot of her decks are very self-centered, whereas Vayne, I think a lot more decks are very supportive of, or like Vayne is very supportive of a lot more decks and champions. Lee Sin 8 to 10, Hordes countdown 8 to 9. Horde one, I think it's definitely a lot less impactful than this Lee Sin change himself. 8 to 10 is a huge deal, because a lot of times like Lee Sin being able to like OTK you as soon as possible so that, you know, you don't die on the following turn is like a pretty big deal. And of course, the ability to level up and just get the Dragon's Rage to recall units is a really huge factor of what makes Lee Sin so powerful. And definitely slowing this down is a pretty impactful change, especially for Auction Lee Sin, which is the main Lee Sin deck. Like they were sort of scraping the first 8 to like get to the level Lee Sin. Like it definitely wasn't the easiest to get to 8. In this specific deck. So I think Lee Sin definitely got a really, really big bump here. I did expect the Auction change. Auction was just super prevalent in pretty much almost anything. And I think this was rather expected. Swain going back to 3 attack, I think also very expected. It was very bizarre to me when they actually buffed both the overwhelm and the attack. So now like it's a lot easier to block Swain, right? So you only need to stick a 4 health unit in front of Swain rather than a 5 health unit, which was completely absurd, especially since Swain decks have access to a bit of spell damage as well on top of it to kind of push through, right? So very reasonable. Whoa. Holy moly. IO Telstones from Health Pot and Homecoming to Gruesome Theater and Ritual Renewal. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. I mean, that's crazy. Those are definitely the two best spells that IO Telstones had access to. Now, Gruesome Theater is honestly like not the worst. For those of you who don't know what it does, it recalls a unit with 3 or less health, I believe. Let's just make sure that I don't look like an absolute idiot. Yeah, so 3 or less health, right? So like that's honestly not bad. But the change from healing potion to ritual renewal, I think is a huge deal because now you don't have access to healing at burst speed, right? And your healing also isn't doubled. Now, granted, if you're playing a karma deck, I think this is still very impactful, but depending on like how fast the meta is, like if you're karming out ritual renewal for like 2 mana with like Victor plus back alley bar, and now you're just drawing 2 cards on top of it, I think that's actually a buff, which is crazy. Um so I don't know. This definitely is very impactful. Healing potion was like one of the most insane cards off of this, so same as Homecoming. Gruesome Theater is honestly a pretty fine substitute. It's definitely a lot less impactful, but we recently got cards like Unworthy Soul. You can still play Will of Ionia in Ionia decks. So I think this Homecoming Gruesome Theater is definitely less of a change. It might even be a buff in some senses, whereas like the Healing Potion Ritual Renewal is definitely a lot more of a gut to the card. Shimon wins Burst of Focus. Generally speaking, that's a pretty big nerf. It doesn't change the fact that, you know, like sometimes you just bank 2 mana and you're like, oh, okay, if my opponent attacks, I'll just play Shimon wins. But now you're just like, you need to play at the end of your turn. In some cases, this doesn't really change all that much. And in some cases it will. Definitely makes it a little bit trickier. But overall, they really didn't change what Vayne Disciple really does. It's still 1/1 elusive, it still draws you a card, and it still acts as a recall, right? It definitely is an issue when you can't like burst it out if you need a blocker, but in some cases, you just don't bank 2 spellman, you just play it out, right? It definitely limits you because now maybe you're like, oh, what if I didn't need it? Or maybe it's like, oh, am I okay attacking with it now? Which I think were already decisions that, you know, you could make. I think they made this card better in the sense that it's now more skill testing without actually changing the card itself, which I think is a really, really cool change. And in terms of how you kind of evaluate buffs and nerfs to cards, I think this is actually a fantastic approach to it. So actually very, very happy despite it being nerfed. Relentless Pursuit, Just Rally, Aegis, 5 cost. Okay. Yeah. I think this is actually really cool because once Golden Aegis just like got released, Relentless Pursuit basically got kind of kicked out. This card was just almost completely better than Relentless Pursuit just because the barrier was a lot better than the +1/+1. And except in some hinge cases where it's like elusives, you know, where the attack actually matters. But Aegis overall was just such a much better card. And the only decks that actually ran Relentless Pursuit were the decks that wanted to run more than 3 rallies. Granted that, oh no, Lucian nerf, yada yada. But overall, it's cool to see this because I think this barrier is actually a really, really huge buff to, I guess, this rally overall. And there should be an extra cost, right? There should be this extra cost. So now if you want to play 4-mana rally, you have to play Relentless Pursuit, and then you don't get a barrier, right? This definitely does affect a deck like Poppy Tarek, where having the barrier in order to protect like your units like your Poppy on your opponent's attack turns really, really mattered. And now this change is definitely really scary because now it's like, well, do I run Relentless Pursuit in my deck over Aegis, or do I play Aegis instead, but I have to pay 1 extra mana for it, right? So now there's actually a choice, which I think is also a very fantastic approach to nerfs, right? Like in the past, there's really no reason to run Pursuit over Aegis unless you want to run more than 3 rallies. But now there's an actual choice to it. If you need the barrier to protect like a key unit, well, you're going to have to pay extra mana for it. So overall, I really like the approach of this nerf, and overall, so far, I think a lot of the buffs and nerfs have had a really good approach to how they want to change how the cards work. Curse Tomb, the 3 mana. I thought they just removed the predict instead, but that's cool. Players have been able to combine Curse Tomb, sometimes more than one, with overall or produce huge next results while hasn't crushed win rates yet. We want to preemptively increase the cost for long-term game health. Okay. Fair enough. This is just a more foresight change anything else, doubling up with Seraphine, that, you know, quadrupling damage. I think they just want to like eliminate this ability to kind of just double cast it, or at least make it a lot harder so that, you know, taking quadruple damage is something that's like kind of like icky. I mean, this card definitely had play around. You could just like glimpse the block or glimpse the target of the, or like kill your own unit, for example, and this will kind of fizzle. With the Seraphine nerf now, you know, if you're specifically playing this like Seraphine like Shrima deck, then obviously the power level of that combo goes down as well. So it's interesting overall because I don't think this card was like super broken or anything, but it looks like they're looking out. Black Secret down to a 1/1. Yeah, I mean, this is huge, right? If it gets like a Pale Cascade, it only comes a 3/3. It's a lot easier to trade into in the early game. Like, this 1 health really matters. Like, maybe you have to start playing Sharp Sight now over like Pale, or like instead of like Pale Cascades. And you're not going to cut Pale Cascades per se, but like the ability for cards like Gem and Pale Cascade to effectively protect your Saga Seeker in early turns is now very, very limited, right? Which makes this card a lot less snowbally because you can kill it now, realistically. And there are in some cases where it's still going to snowball if it gets to like, you know, 5 health or whatever, then it's already pretty late to like really consider killing it. But overall, I think this is quite nice. It's not a 3/4 on turn 2 anymore. I don't think that's Ionia Hookmaster. I could be wrong, but Ionia Hookmaster down to a 0/1 over a 1/1. Card that wasn't actually shown in the previous sort of graphic, but I think definitely a card that people recognize and identified as one of, if not an auto include in most Ionian Noxus decks. So definitely a card that I think that they wanted to look at, lowering your power to decreaser, which I think is fair. I think this card was just like good, like very good, right? And I think it's okay to have very good cards. Like, it wasn't like super insane, but I do understand, you know, it's okay. Like, this change is like fine. I don't think that it's really the Hookmaster herself that's like the biggest deal. Granted that in like more aggressive decks, the power definitely does matter, but into a lot of other decks that weren't really trying to like burn down your opponent or aggro down your opponent, like it was more about the weapon itself, like the ability to roll Scout, the ability to roll Fearsome, ability to roll Overwhelm, Combat Reel, things like that, right? That really made cards like Hookmaster shine. And it was just a 2-drop that allowed you access to that weapon rather than anything else. So I think it's fine. But I don't think they really touched the part where it made it strong. I think you're still going to play this card just because I think having access to the weapons is super important for a lot of decks like the Vayne decks as well. But overall, I don't think this is the... It's impactful, but I'm still... I don't want to say I'm surprised because I think that, you know, this card is super good or anything, but I don't know if it solved the core issue of what made this card good. Variety card buffs. Popro the Great. Create a Yordle to summon a Yordle. Wait, what? Grant other allied. What's going on here? Okay, so he summons a Yordle, and then he grants himself the buff as well. He just summons a random Yordle for 3 mana? What? That can't be right. I refuse to believe that that's correct. It's manifest a Yordle. It's not summon, it's manifest. Classic Riot typo. Okay, but you get a manifest a Yordle now instead of create a random one. Cool. And now he buffs himself. Cool. Is that good? Not really. Like, I would compare this card to like Bandle City Mare or Loping Telescope, right? Granted, he does have this, you know, attack, grant all Yordles this buff, but is that really impactful? Not sure. Soul Scout, 3 mana, 2/2 when I'm summoned, grant me +1/+1 for each Yordle ally. And then Yordle newbie, 1 mana, 0/2 when you summon another Yordle, give me +2/+0 this round. So he's a 1 mana conditional 2/2. That seems, I guess it can go more than +2/+0. But he starts as 0/2. God, this card's not good, man. It doesn't have quick attack. Like, I'm reminded of like the mushroom ring that, you know, this is a 2/2 quick attack that grows for phase, and this doesn't really hold a candle to it. Granted, it is, you know, 1 mana card, but I just don't really, I'm not really impressed by this one. And there's just not enough like Yordle Swarm anyways. Like, this one is like okay-ish, but you can't like curve this. It's a 3 mana 4/4, and that's just like whatever if you play it on turn 3 with 2 Yordles on board. Sometimes the 5/5, and then the later game is just batter from 2 cost to 1. I think I want to say like a lot of these like Frostbite cards are already like very fringe, or like were like so close, or like just like lack people experimenting with it. And I think Shatter was close to being one of them. Like, this is like Flock now, right? They essentially made Shatter Flock. Because now you have like Avarosian Hearthguard, or I mean, sorry, Avarosian Huntsman, or no, sorry, Icefield Archer in a Shatter. Say like Sentry Flock. Wait, they just gave you Flock for Frostbite? I mean, that's kind of funny. But like Rhymefang Wolf, this is significant though. 3 health challenger. I mean, 2/3. Like, the attack didn't matter, right? Because you were striking like a Frostbite enemy. 3 health. I mean, this is fantastic change. I'm very confused. Like, every patch they always buff Frostbite, and I think like Frostbite's already like a good deck overall. Like, it has good matchups. It has matchups that just absolutely crushes, and they just keep buffing it. So it's always surprising to see. But I mean, as far as how significant these buffs are compared to, I think, some other buffs that they have done in the past, Rhymefang Wolf's a little bit tricky because, you know, historically Ash decks don't actually run this card. They rather just like run stat sticks instead, like, you know, Avarosian Trapper, things like that. Giving it 3 health might make a difference, but overall, like, the Noxus decks don't actually play this card. They just play the 5/1 Challenger instead. Now, if you're playing some other deck that actually does play Rhymefang Wolf, I mean, this is a significant change to it, right? Shatter is really interesting though. Like, a 1 mana slow Frostbite to set up like Ash OTKs, obviously very good. It's like Brittle Steel levels of good. Of course it's slow, but that doesn't really matter sometimes. It does matter into like obviously like Ruination decks or whatnot, but generally speaking, it's a lot harder to have a punish to like slow Frostbites. It's kind of like stuns overall, right? You just stun 3 times, like any Jin, for example. And then a Frostbite works in the same sense. Obviously you don't have the same speed as a deck like Annie Jin, but now it's being 1 mana, acting as like a Flock, like, it's hard to activate than activate than Flock for sure, but I think it's comparative, which I think is super insane. Like, you attack with Ash and then you Shatter. God, this card might actually be really good now. That's crazy. I don't think that's Troll Scavenger either. But Troll Scavenger to a 0/4, and I believe it grows by 3. Is this a 2 mana 3/4? It's a 2 mana 3/4. Holy shit. What? What? That's disgusting. They just gave Freljord a 2 mana 3/4. Are you playing this card still? Because like, you play like on turn 2, you play Voice of the Old Ones, right? Like, you don't need a unit realistically. Like, yes, they struggle with the early game, that's a given fact, but you just ramp harder now. I think a 2 mana 3/4 might just be super insane that you just play it, but like, the ramp decks didn't use this card anyways. So it's interesting. I think this card's a lot better as a 3/4 than a 4/3, but the relevance of it is a little bit lost to me. Hexobliterator deals 6 damage, 6 for 6, and obliterate. I mean, that's pretty spicy. I mean, that's pretty cool. And then Celestial Impact also heals Nexus 3. Cool. 6. What's the breakpoints for 6? Like, yes, it kills Scion now, right? Whoop-de-doo. Your Scion deck is never winning against PNZ anymore. Woo. Like 5 to 6 breakpoints, definitely a lot less. Especially right now, right? Are you gonna main deck this card in your deck? Maybe. Like it could slot over Vengeance, sort of, right? If you're playing like SIP and Z, you might play like this over Vengeance, depending on the meta. Like this is a meta call, right? Like Vengeance is strictly most likely better. But in some cases, you might play this card over it. If you generate this card off like Reggie, you're super happy now that's buffed. I don't think heal 3 is very relevant. Ravenbloom down from 12 to 11, so just hitting a middle ground, kind of seeing if it like brings back up. I don't think it really. I think it's too. Well, given the Seraphine nerf, this might be better. So now like you might switch from like Seraphine Ezreal back to like Ravenbloom Ezreal, for example. Are you though? Unsure. 11 is still pretty slow. Broad main 3/5. Whoop-de-doop. Sign in back to 3/5. When asked for a comment, he said, "My bad." Yeah, I don't know. Signing got bullied out. You just play like Shimon wins nowadays. You don't need sign in anymore. This card is a relic of the past. Laurent Duelist grants an it grants an ally in hand challenger. With nerfs to Demacia rally decks, we want to make sure the region still maintains its appeal, so we're buffing Duelist to give it a little bit back and leading into other strengths. On region's health over time. Yeah, so I think overall, like they do want to like take Demacia away from rally. Right now they have what? They have challenger, they have tough, and they have rally. And like strike spells, right? So now you play this and you grant a card in Allen hand challenger. I mean, I think this is like pretty insane. Like granting challenger is really good. I think a card like Confront is a card that people just like look down on. But like Confront was played quite a bit in like during like the Shyvana Pantheon days. And especially because you can play a second region with this, you give it enhance and curve it out. Like you give this like any champion with quick attack, right? Then all of a sudden you just have a threat. You play this into like Sivir. Like you play this on turn, you play Osh on turn 2, Laurent Duelist on turn 3, then you drop a challenger, spell shield, quick attack Sivir. The more I say it, the more dummy this card gets. Because like granting challenger is like really insane. I don't think that's like to be underestimated. There's a reason why there's no challenger weapon off of the Hookmasters. Because I think that's just too insane. And I think this card is just kind of nutty. Yeah. You're going to see like Challenger Sivers dropped on turn 4, and that's not going to be very fun. Or like Challenger Rumble, or like Challenger, you know, any quick attack thing. Challenger, like, fuck it, Draven on turn 3. I don't know, but like the idea of granting Challenger to quick attack for what is pretty much a no cost because you're just playing a 2-mana 2/2. Granted, there's some condition where you have to have both cards in your hand, and you have to play this card before you play the other card, but I mean, this card's insane, no? Yeah, bro says a 1/1 so he doesn't die and get silenced. Oh, have mercy. Safety Inspector down to 5 mana. Okay. So Safety Inspector down to 5 mana. I think some people, or at least some friends I've heard, were hypothesizing that you get this, you know, when you summon it. But this is almost essentially the same thing, where now you play it and on turn 6, you get the inspection pass. But I think it's actually pretty cool. Like this card is actually pretty nice. So I think it's cool. 3/3 A-Bomb. 3/3 A-Bomb. guess that's better. Is that playable? 3 health is such a big boost that this card's probably okay. Is this archetype still good nowadays? It's hard to say. I think this change is still good. It's definitely not a revert back to what it was, like a 4-3. But I don't know. Maybe this card's good now. It's hard to say. Unsure about that one. Bone Club for 5-5 is still unplayable. Shadowblade Fanatica 3-3. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty good. I don't know if this card is struggling to see play. Like, Kane just didn't see play. Is this card going to make Kane more playable? I don't think so. Is this card going to be run in various decks now? I'm unsure. Like, I don't think this card is all that bad in the past, but 3-3-3 quick attack, like, that's pretty decent. Wraithful Rider to an 8-3. That's not impactful. Gorlith, 12 health. So now your Nexus gets 12 health minimum. Is that why he wasn't being played? I don't think so. So I don't think he's actually going to be played anymore. Dust Rider down to a 4 mana 3-4. Dust Rider could be a cool finisher. As I got puts people to sleep, huh? No, it's not. It's not. You compare this card to Nocturne and you realize that this card doesn't do what Nocturne does, and you ask yourself, why am I playing this card? If you have this card plus level Nocturne and you win the game, that seems like overkill because you could just play other units with it. I don't think this was a reason why. Like, this card just doesn't actually end the game. It's not really a finisher. Reroll to 4. Oh my god. So now I can curve this into Talia on curve. Like, that's insane. I think this is like potentially, like, I think this card is like not bad. We saw like the strength of Fearsome, especially having Fearsome weapon. Obviously having like the boost to it is really good. I think this card's like actually good, potentially. In its specific Reaver's Road Talia deck. That deck got a lot better with this change. How much better? Unclear, but a lot better. Spirits Unleashed now grants allies everywhere. Wait. That good. It's better. It's a cool buff. That's all I will say. Like, it's just a flat out buff, right? Is that what's making Udyr unplayable? No. But cool. Rock Colossus. You create a copy of me that costs 4 and it grows the equipment stats. Again, is that what was preventing this card from being played? No. Is this a good buff? Yes. Is this card playable now? No. Darkin Bliss no longer deals damage, but you didn't change Naganeka. Is that the reason this card was unplayable? No. Is this card good now? No. I don't know, man. So strange. Oh my god. Wait. You can play Pathless Ancient for 0 mana if you recall 2 units. If you play Homecoming, Pathless Ancient is 0 mana. In the past, it was just a 2 cost you recalled, but now you can play it for 0 potentially if you recall 2 units. Like, if you go like Maker, or like, you know, Maker recall Pathless Ancient, I'm sure there's some sort of like tempo recall aggro kind of deck that this might slot in. But like cards like Stagehand just kind of do that a little bit better, right? Unconditional 2 mana 4/2 that stuns a unit, and you kind of just dance around this part where you have to play recalls, because I think the recall cards themselves are actually relatively low tempo. In Hearthstone, you have a card like Sap, which is like a 2 mana Will of Ionia. But in this game, that card costs 4 mana, right? So the ability to like tempo this out is a lot less because you don't actually have that potential. Where tempo cards like Sap and Hearthstone are meant to be tempo cards, whereas Will of Ionia is definitely, I would, while it still is a tempo card, you have to be ahead for that card to be a tempo card. Whereas Sap, you know, you need to be ahead by less because it only costs 2 mana, right? Sorry, I'm bringing Hearthstone references if you don't understand me. But I just don't think that Ionia or like any recall card really has the tempo tools to like really like make this 0 mana. It's like ideally you want to play this for 0 mana, right? You don't want to play this for 2 mana. You want to play this for 0 mana, but you have to recall twice. Yes, you can like homecoming into whatever. Maybe in a later turn you can go like make your Pathless Ancient. But I think this card is still too slow. Void Seeker can hit champions after you evolved. 1 mana, deal 3 to a unit if you evolved. I have to think that's pretty okay, right? Like if you hit evolve on turn 4 and all of a sudden you have a 1 mana, deal 3. That's conditionally good, depending on the meta, right? Dealing 3 has 3 health. Seraphine has 4 health. Vayne has 4 health. Varus has 4 health. Like the issue with Kai's decks is that if you don't kill a unit and it survives, it's the same thing as not killing the unit, right? So depending on the breakpoints, if dealing 3 is good enough, well, this is pretty good. If dealing 3 is not good enough, well, this card's still not good. Granted, you know, leveled Kai's now can ping off 1 damage, but if this doesn't kill the unit it's targeting, it's not good. And that's as simple as it is. But definitely a lot better. Battle Tailstones, Keeper's Verdict to Electro Harpoon. Electro Harpoon, Heroic Refrain, Yordle Contraption. The best card here was Heroic Refrain already. And if only one of the 3 cards is good, you're not going to play this card. You're going to be happy to generate this card off of like Oncologist because you wanted to hit Heroic Refrain. Sometimes like Electro Harpoon's fine, but it's not a reason to play this card. It's better because now if you hit this card and you were looking for either Electro Harpoon or Heroic Refrain, now you have a second option in the pool. But it doesn't make this card much better to play in your deck, but it does make it better to generate, right? I will say there are positions where, you know, having access to Keeper's Verdict from cards like Oncologist or Trinket Trade is actually better for you because maybe sometimes you're looking specifically for Keeper's Verdict, whereas now it's no longer in that card pool. So if you play Oncologist or like Trinket Trade, you don't have this high roll opportunity to hit Keeper's Verdict anymore. So it's interesting to say. It's too slowly. I agree to stay aggressive, low to the ground. They want Battle City to be aggressive, low to the ground. But like you just main deck Heroic Refrain. I don't think you're gonna play this card. That's all of them. Spirit Blossom. Oh, I love the Spirit Blossom skin lines. Might be one of my personal favorites. So we have Ari, Evelyn, Kindred, Master Yi, and Tenmu. And Yasuo. Spirit Blossom Yasuo. Oh. Oh. Oh, and Master Yi. This Master Yi skin looks sick. I mean, Kindred, Spirit Blossom, I just absolutely adore. So I'm in love. Check out the chat. Oh my god, that's so fucking good. Take my money, Riot. Blah blah blah. Evelyn, mana. Fix an issue. Ath, whatever. Sure. This is hilarious. Was visually reset after a double strike. Fix an issue where the Darkin bow stats are visually reset. Is it not supposed to reset on a double strike? That's so interesting. I really thought, I don't know, I'll have to see that. I really thought Double Strike worked that way, but regardless. I mean, yeah, very good buff, very good patch in my mind. I really like the direction of a lot of the nerfs and changes they made, because I think they're actually they're done with a lot of thought behind it, especially things like this, things like this, things like this in a way where you're not like completely changing the card. You're getting a recall, you're getting a heal. They're just slightly different. But everything up here, like the champion changes, I think they're mostly in line. I think Vayne could have got hit a little bit harder. Seraphine definitely got really absolutely gutted. And these buffs, Varus, Jax, I don't know if they needed them. Jinx, it's a cool buff. Gwen, is cool as well, I think. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. Seraphine's definitely getting gutted, but Vayne's are on a stay. And I think that's the main thing you can take away from this expansion. Like, Vayne decks didn't even run rallies. So this will be interesting. Vayne's gonna be probably one of the best. You're not gonna have Seraphine as much to like, you know, around in the meta. So now you have like the cultist versus the Vayne decks, right? I think that's gonna be the main things that stick out. And then we'll see if any of these buffs are impactful enough to bring anything else back in the meta. Like you might see like some Ashe decks to counter, and like Ashe decks or Varus decks just counter Vayne decks. You're no longer going to have the Seraphine to like counter those decks. So there's going to be a hole left in the meta, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of fixes it. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys are excited for the patch, and hopefully we'll have some fun decks coming out in this week. See you guys. Have a good one.